Hey everybody, Samuel Allred here. Welcome back to the Persistence Outdoors podcast. As a hunter, I'm always looking forward to the next season, and in this case, it's the holiday season. I was thinking about giving gifts and how tricky that is sometimes, so I thought I would help you all out by providing a list of 10 gift ideas for hunters, whether that's your dad, brother, spouse, whoever. These gifts are useful. They have the potential to be thoughtful. That's your job as the giver, of course. They're not too expensive. They're not going to break the bank. And there's something that's easy to gift because they're not too specific. A lot of hunters enjoy gear. So if they've had something on their mind and you give them something else that's similar but not what they wanted, that could be frustrating. But I think these gifts are general enough that you can give them without disappointing whoever's receiving the gift. So they're in no particular order, but we'll jump in with gift idea number 1, a knife. At the risk of being a little cliche, knives are a great gift for hunters because they blend usefulness and uniqueness. And for any women out there listening, knives are almost always a safe gift for guys, and they have the potential to be a good gift. As a guy, I've never received a knife and thought, that wasn't a great gift. Knives are a pretty safe bet. Now, if the person you're buying for doesn't have a good skinning knife, that would be a good place to start. What you want to look for is a fixed blade knife that has a wide, non-serrated blade that's about 3.5 to 4 inches long. I actually have a skinning knife that's a little bit shorter than this, and it does just fine. Right around 3.5 inches is probably the most common length, maybe up to 4 inches. A basic skinning knife will have a slight drop point and a long curved cutting edge. Skinning knives often have a stocky appearance, and that's because the blade is made for slicing, not stabbing or puncturing. And that wide blade with a deep belly gives you a longer edge for smooth cuts. Another good thing to look for is jimping, and those are the little notches cut in the spine of a knife blade right above the handle, and that gives you extra control over the knife as you're making cuts. To get an inexpensive skinning knife, you could look for a buck knife. They have a wide range of knives. You could also look at a Gerber brand skinning knife. A little bit more expensive would be something like a Benchmade knife. And then if you wanted to get something high end, you could look at a Montana Knife Company knife. Those are going to be more expensive, but it's really a high quality piece of craftsmanship. Another knife to consider would be a boning knife, which has a long, narrow blade and is used for processing an animal. You may be familiar with a fillet knife. A boning knife is similar, but it's usually a little bit more rigid and not as long, and it has less curve in the blade. This is great for someone who's interested in processing their own game, or maybe they already do, but they're doing it with their skinning knife and a steak knife. A boning knife could really be a thoughtful gift to help them process their game better. If you're looking for something that's kind of unique but not too expensive, you might take a look at an Opinel brand knife. That's Opinel. They're made in Savoie, France, which maybe isn't the best thing to advertise to a bunch of red-blooded Americans, but it is kind of interesting. They're made in the French Alps, and they're excellent wood-handled pocket knives that blend elegance and utilitarianism. You could definitely skin a deer with one, though I haven't tried myself. For someone who's interested in this sort of thing, you could get a carbon steel Opinel knife, though it does require some extra care so it doesn't rust. And historically, before stainless steel, many knives would have been made out of carbon steel. So it's kind of a neat gift for someone who would appreciate the qualities of that material and sort of the historical connection. The knives are also very easy to customize if you want to burn someone's name into the handle or choose a different type of wood for the handle. And that can be really fun just to put a thoughtful touch on it. What I like about my Opinel knife is just the simple design. It has a good blade shape for a variety of tasks. It holds its edge well. And I really like the handle shape. It's a little bit like a cylinder shape. And that rounded handle that the blade folds into actually feels really good in my pocket. It doesn't interfere with other things in my pockets the way that a knife with a clip would. It's kind of a small detail, but I've found that I can carry my Opinel knife in my pocket with my phone or my keys or whatever, and it doesn't get caught on things or scratch things the way that a clip knife would or a different knife with more angular features. To go along with knives, my second gift idea is a knife sharpener. What good is a knife if it isn't sharp? There's all sorts of knife sharpeners out there, but my favorite by far is the WorkSharp Guided Field Sharpener. It's a little rectangular unit about 6 inches long, and each side has a different sharpening surface. So one side has a rough diamond plate, the other side has a fine diamond plate. There's a ceramic rod and a leather strop, so you can get a super fine edge. Each side also has a 20-degree guide so that you know how to hold your knife when you're sharpening. Super helpful, super easy to use. I just read the instructions and I was able to start sharpening knives right away. It's so much better than a pull-through sharpener. Pull-through sharpeners are easy, but they really don't give you a great edge, and they can take off a lot of material. And it's also easier than whetstones because the WorkSharp field sharpener works completely dry. You don't have to bring multiple stones. It's all one compact little unit. I always carry this knife sharpener with me when I'm hunting because I know it's incredibly frustrating trying to break down an animal with a dull knife. So it's great to have it with me, and anytime I need to touch up my knife edge, I've got the tools I need. Before I got this knife sharpener, I didn't really understand how sharp knives could be all the time. It's kind of funny to say, but I think I just had knives and they would be a little bit dull, and I'd sharpen them with a pull-through sharpener, but then they'd get dull again. With this sharpener, I keep my knives sharp enough to cut hairs, and it just makes using them so much more enjoyable. All right, gift idea number 3 is a headlamp. If you've listened to the podcast at all so far, you will have heard me talk about headlamps. I love them. It's one of those things that if I head out to go hunting and I realize I left it at home, I will turn around for. They're crucial in so many situations. Maybe you're setting up decoys while duck hunting before it's light, or sneaking into a deer stand, or maybe you're hiking back in the dark after glassing all day. They're just so important. There's plenty of good options out there, but personally, I love my Black Diamond Storm 450 headlamp. It's lightweight but durable, making it great for backpacking, and it's plenty bright. The max output is 450 lumens, which is plenty bright enough for everything I've needed so far. I've used another headlamp in the past that was around 200 lumens. That was the max output, and it just wasn't bright enough, especially when the battery was getting a little old. I'd recommend for hunting, I would recommend something that is 450 lumens or lighter, maybe up to 750 lumens. I've used a 1000 lumen flashlight before, and that was plenty, I think more than enough. So it definitely doesn't hurt to go brighter, but I just don't think you need more than maybe 750 lumens. And if you do get a bright headlamp like that, make sure it has a dimming setting or a red light setting for those situations when you don't want to light up the woods. Another nice feature for a headlamp is a rechargeable battery. I think the best ones actually will take a rechargeable battery or your normal AA or AAA batteries. And that's a great option, so you have lots of flexibility. You could recharge your battery for shorter hunts, but then have extra batteries for longer hunts. Gift idea number 4 on my list is a vacuum sealer. I love my vacuum sealer, and it's great for 2 reasons: for preparing food for a hunt and for processing animals after a hunt. So for preparing food, it's easy to just eat convenience foods when you're hunting, and a lot of those foods will make you not feel great after a couple of days of it. But with a vacuum sealer, you can bring more food, more real food into the field with you, and less of that processed junk food. Vacuum sealing increases the shelf life of food a little bit, preventing it from oxidizing. And vacuum sealer bags are great for portioning out food. I often will bring chicken salad when I'm hunting, and so I'll put that in a vacuum sealer bag, seal that up, and that will last a pretty long time, especially if I put it in the refrigerator for a day. You can also dehydrate food and then vacuum seal it. That's a great way to go. Basically, you're making your homemade mountain house or peak refuel or whatever by dehydrating your own food. Something I also did recently with a vacuum sealer was make a bunch of stew, and then I put it in vacuum sealer bags, vacuum sealed it, and then froze all of that stew. So then I had 10 bags of frozen stew, and I threw it in my cooler, and that kept cool for a long time on a longer hunt. On the other end of the hunt, vacuum sealers are great for processing animals. With an average vacuum sealer, you can process a whole animal and have it ready for the freezer by yourself. It's a little bit easier than plastic wrapping everything and using butcher paper, though some people think it may not be as durable as plastic wrap and butcher paper. But I think it's easier, and more it's commonly accepted to vacuum seal meat. Also, I haven't done it yet, but say you're traveling, you could bring a vacuum sealer with you and run it off your car, a battery pack, a generator, and get a significant amount of processing done before you even get home. I don't have a specific brand to recommend because my vacuum sealer isn't even made anymore, but it couldn't have been more than $75, and I've used 11-inch wide vacuum sealer bags to process an entire white-tailed deer. So there's definitely higher end options on the market that are going to cost more than $75, but really it doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't even need to be that big. With an 11-inch wide vacuum sealer bag, you're going to be able to process all kinds of animals. The next idea on my list is a cooler. Hunters probably love coolers more than anybody else. A good cooler allows you to hunt further away from refrigeration for longer. They're also great for storing food in your car. And once you have a good cooler, you'll find that they come in handy for things outside of hunting too, like camping or road trips. There's lots of options for coolers out there, but they fall into 2 main groups. That's roto-molded coolers and injection molded coolers. So roto-molded coolers will be coolers from brands like Yeti, Arctic, Orca, and Blue coolers. These coolers will give you top-of-the-line performance, but they can be very expensive. And I mean very expensive. Yeti coolers are probably great coolers, but I can hardly recommend them because they are so expensive. There's also the injection molded coolers, and these brands are like Lifetime, Coleman, and Igloo. These are going to be more bulky, less insulating, but they're also going to be more affordable. Although on the bottom end of the quality spectrum, these coolers can be just plastic bins. So you do need to look at the cooler and make sure it has some insulating properties. From this group, Lifetime is probably the best option. They make good coolers that are reasonably affordable. And then if you're looking at a Coleman or Igloo, you might look for something like a marine option of the cooler made for boats. They're usually made in a lighter color, and they're sometimes a little bit heavier and have better insulation. Or something like an extreme option. I have an old Coleman Extreme cooler, And it's not the most expensive or the best insulating, but I can put something like 8 gallons of ice in there. I freeze gallon jugs of ice and then put it in there. And with that amount of ice, it does pretty well. When buying a cooler, you want to look for these things. First of all, you want to check and see if it's actually insulated. So, do the walls sound hollow, or is there something in there insulating? You'll also want a lid that seals well and preferably locks down. When you're buying a cooler, a lighter color is also better than a dark color because it won't absorb as much heat from the sun. And you want sturdy handles and sturdy wheels if the cooler has wheels. A lot of coolers you'll see out there are advertised as 10-day coolers. Most people don't need to hold ice for that long, although it's nice to know that you could. But you could probably get something that's more like a 5-day cooler, and that'd still be super helpful for most hunters. It also helps to learn how to pack coolers correctly so you get the best performance out of them. When it comes to capacity, the actual capacity you'll need depends on the size of the animal you're hunting, right? Once you quarter an animal out and maybe even debone it, it will fit into a smaller cooler than you might expect. From reading way too many forums and online articles, here's a rough guideline for capacity that you need for different animals. And keep in mind that just depending on the dimensions of your cooler, you may need to bone the meat out. For white-tailed deer, around 65 to 75 quarts of capacity should be sufficient. For mule deer, it's going to be higher, around 75 to 105 quarts. And then for elk, you'll need 150 to 200 quarts, likely boned out just because elk quarters are so long. Bears are a little bit tricky. They have a wide variation in size, and it depends if you want to keep the hide or not. So it'd be best to figure out how big an average bear is in your area and go from there. Whatever size you choose, remember that you'll need to have room for the meat and for the ice. Just putting warm meat into a cooler without any ice isn't going to help. So make sure you have room for both. Also keep in mind that the larger the cooler, the heavier it is, especially when it's packed full of meat and ice. So it may be best to get multiple smaller coolers instead of one huge cooler. A 65 quart capacity cooler is a pretty usable size, and if you need more capacity than that, you could get 2 of them. And again, that's a little bit more maneuverable, and you can likely pick it up instead of trying to pick up a huge 120 quart cooler that's full of meat and ice. Gift idea number 6 is a Bino harness. A Bino harness is like a little backpack for your chest that holds your binoculars. It keeps your binoculars handy and secure, and it's more comfortable than a single strap or an elastic harness. And it's less annoying and allows you to move quickly because the binoculars won't be bouncing on your chest. Some Bino harnesses have pouches for your rangefinder or a modular system that allows you to attach a bear spray canister or a chest holster. They also might hold your phone, your game calls, GPS locator, and things like that. Not all Bino harnesses are the same size, so try to make sure that the person's binoculars will fit. Usually Bino harnesses will either give an idea of the binoculars they fit for, or they'll give a measurement. So if you can measure the binoculars, you'll be good to go. There's lots of similar options out there, so just look for something that's durable, ergonomic, easy to access, quiet, and most of all, something that will strap down and keep the binoculars secure and close to the user's body so that it's not bouncing around and being annoying. Let's look at my next idea, which is really more of a category, and that's scope tools and accessories. A rifle scope is a big part of your weapon system, It can cost a lot of money, so it's worth it to have some tools and accessories for it that help you get the most value out of your scope. The first tool is a torque wrench. When mounting a scope on a rifle, most scope rings have a specific torque parameter for the screws. If you over-tighten the screws on your scope ring, you could damage the scope externally or internally. And over-tightening them could cause the scope to not function properly. So if you crush the scope tube, that's bad. It can also cause the scope not to track properly when you're adjusting your elevation or windage or parallax. And over-tightening can strip your screws over time. If you under-tighten your scope rings, your scope could shift and come loose. And that's an issue as well, because if your scope's loose, you're never going to be able to zero your rifle, and it could damage your scope over time. A torque wrench is helpful to avoid these issues and help you mount your scope properly. It's not completely necessary. You can mount a scope without a torque wrench, but it is nice to take the guesswork out of things and help you tighten to a specific torque recommendation. It's called a wrench, but a torque wrench used for this type of task really looks more like a screwdriver. So if you're buying it for someone, you're looking for something called a torque wrench, but it's going to look like a screwdriver, not your average wrench. Another accessory for a scope is a bubble level kit, and also a bubble that attaches to your scope. When you're using a scope that has some sort of drop compensation, like elevation turrets or a bullet drop compensating reticle, it's important that your scope is mounted level with your rifle. It becomes even more important the further out you shoot. So you can make sure that your scope is mounted level with your rifle by using a bubble level kit. One bubble goes on a flat surface on your rifle, something like across the action. Then you clamp the second bubble to your barrel and you line those bubbles up. And then you take your first bubble and you put that on a flat surface on your scope as you're tightening it down. And you make sure that that bubble is also level. And that way your action and your rifle scope are aligned. Now, the bubble level kit is not the same as the bubble level that you actually attach to your scope. Those are usually sold separately. The bubble level that you attach to your scope is usually mounted on a ring that you can clamp to the scope tube. And this bubble level helps you to make sure that you're not canting the rifle when you're shooting. It can be really hard when you're in the field to tell if you're canting the rifle, especially when you're dealing with different slopes. Another good scope accessory to consider would be a scope cover or caps, especially for expensive scopes. You know, a scope can cost just as much as a rifle. Especially for those expensive scopes, it's great to have a scope cover to protect it. You can get neoprene covers that just pull on over the entire scope, and it protects it from getting scratched. It protects it from dirt and rain. And then when you're ready to go take a shot, you can just pull that cover off, the whole entire thing, and take a shot. You can also get scope caps, which just protect the ends of the scope. And some of those are see-through so that you can make quick shots. But then if you have more time, you can take them off or flip them up and have better clarity for long shots. Gift idea number 8 is electronic ear protection. Ear protection is important because rifles and shotguns are loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage. And that hearing damage is cumulative over time. While it seems easy enough to put some earplugs in, it's not that easy because it restricts your sense of hearing, which is really important when you're hunting. And those little earplugs are sometimes hard to insert and easy to lose. You could also wear over-ear muffs, but those can be uncomfortable and it still restricts your sense of hearing. Even for those of us who want to protect our ears, there's often a time in a hunt where you are just so ready to shoot something and you think, if I have an opportunity walking around this corner or wherever I'm going, if I have an opportunity, I'm going to take it whether I have my hearing protection in or not. Electronic hearing protection takes care of this issue because you can still hear what's going on around you and be protected at the same time. So you're ready to take a shot at any time. You can even hear the shot noise, but it's attenuated above a certain level to be safer for your hearing. Electronic hearing protection doesn't usually have as high of a noise reduction rating as earplugs or passive earmuffs, but it's way better if it means that you'll wear some protection instead of none at all. There's two main types of hearing protection that are referred to: over-ear and in-ear. One popular option of over-ear electronic hearing protection is the Walker's Razor Slim model. These are earmuffs that are known to be comfortable. They have a little bit more of a low profile so they don't get in your way when you're shooting. And you can double up if you want to when you're at the range. So you could put foam ear protection in, and then you could put these Walker's Razor muffs over the top for double protection. A good in-ear option is the Walker's Silencer BT. I think that stands for Bluetooth. The in-ear option functions a lot like an AirPod, but it's just going to make a better seal and have some foam to block out outside noise. The in-ears can be a little bit more comfortable than muffs, and they have a lower profile and don't interfere with your rifle or your hat. Another good gift for a hunter, and kind of a fun one, is a game call. Some hunts that are more calling intensive than others are elk hunting in September during the elk rut, waterfowl hunting, turkey hunting, and predator hunting. So if the person you're buying for is into any of these types of hunting, you might consider getting them a game call. They might have a game call already. It doesn't necessarily rule it out. You should just figure out what they've got and get them something different. So if they have a turkey pot call, maybe you could get them a pack of diaphragm calls, and they might be interested in learning how to use diaphragm calls. Or if they have a single reed duck call, maybe get them a double reed or a teal whistle or something that just gives them more opportunities in the field. Christmas might not seem like the best time to give a game call, but it does give you time to practice, and that's really important. So I've actually received a game call for Christmas once, and I had plenty of time to figure it out. And when I started thinking about the season, I started using that call a lot more, and I felt competent by the time I actually went out and started hunting. So something to think about. Again, just get them something that they don't already have. The final idea on my list is more of a category, and that's emergency gear for their car. Recently, I went out to go bear hunting, and before I went hunting, I looked at my tires and thought, you know what? I need to get new tires. Those seem super worn down. But I went anyway. I thought, I'll drive slow. I'll be fine. I'll replace these when I get back. Instead, I went out, I drove fast, I went on super sharp, rocky roads, and I punctured 2 tires. Well, I went to get my tools, and honestly, I had never checked my jack because I bought the car a year ago. It's a very old car, and I just never checked. It just never really crossed my mind. And the tools were not good. The handle for the jack was this 3-piece thing that you had to assemble and then use screws to secure the joints. But the screws were messed up and the holes for the screws were warped. And so when I put it all together, the screws wouldn't go in, and I just had to hold it all together with tension while I was turning the jack. Well, it would have been nice if I had some emergency gear in that situation. It would have been nice if I had, first of all, a better jack, something that was easy to use, and I could have just jacked up my car quickly. Another good thing to have would have been a tire patch kit. And I did have an air compressor, but I found out that my air compressor was really bad. It hardly compresses air. It's so old. So it would have been nice to have a better air compressor. Another good piece of emergency gear is a battery pack that allows you to jump your car. Sometimes you're driving an old car or you're driving in cold weather and it zaps your battery. Having this battery pack can get you out of a lot of tough situations where you're in cold weather and you don't have cell service. It's also great for charging your phone and doing other things like that. I have a Halo battery pack. It's great. It's a good gift. It's fairly affordable, and I really enjoy having that in my car. If you're buying for your spouse or someone who you want to come back out of the woods, emergency gear for their car is a good investment. If you think about hunting, we often go places that are hard to get to. Maybe they don't have cell service. So anything that will help someone get their car back out or be ready to help someone else who's in trouble, those would all make great gifts. All right, so there's 10 gift ideas for a hunter. I hope this was helpful and one of those ideas works out for you. That's all for today, but I will be back next week with some more conventional programming. In the meantime, it's deer season, so get out, kill a deer, and I'll catch you next week.